Welcome into another episode of the Inside the Ice House podcast. Today, our guest is Keelan Adamson. He is the CEO of Transocean. Keelan, thanks so much for joining us inside the Ice House. Happy to have you here.
It's great to be here, Lance. This is my first ever podcast, so I'm
exciting. There you go.
I'm really excited about doing it.
So we're going to break you in. It'll be a fun conversation. We'll talk a lot about Transocean over the next however many minutes. And I want to kick things off for listeners who may not follow offshore drilling today, right? How do you describe what Transocean does, right? What's the core of your business? You know, the services you provide, the environments you provide them in, and the role you play in helping energy companies reach resources that can only be accessed offshore.
Yeah, great question, Lance. We are a offshore driller, so we are owning and operating some of the biggest deepwater rigs in the world. So what does that mean? We work for customers like BP and Exxon and Shell and a lot of the major names that you would know, and we essentially help them find and appraise and develop oil fields in the world. And we work essentially pretty global. We work all around the world. We own 27 offshore vessels. We own 20 drill ships and 7 semi-submersibles that work predominantly in the harsh environment. So our role is a very important role. We take great pride, actually, in the role we have in the energy sector. And frankly, without drillers, all companies can't get to the product, right? They can't get to the hydrocarbons. So we play a very critical role in that process, and we're very proud to do it.
And so Transocean turning 100 is an incredible milestone that I want to bring up, especially in an industry that has seen shifts, challenges, tailwinds as well. You've spent now 30 years of your career inside the company, from your early days on the rig all the way to now, obviously leading the company. With that perspective, and I'm sure we could do a whole podcast on just this question alone, right? Going through all 30 years. Don't want you to do that, but just from that perspective of the last 3 decades, right? How would you sort of describe Transocean's evolution into the industry leader that it is now?
That is a long question.
Yeah. But and like I said, we could probably do a whole podcast on that alone, right? Let's go year by year by year. But, just in a few words, how would you just describe, what Transocean has become into the leader it is?
A lot of vision, right? We had a leadership that understood that the opportunity presented itself to work in an environment. So as a company, we have moved from land rigs actually off to offshore, shallow water offshore, and then we've progressed further and further as technology's advanced into the deeper water plays, right? So it requires a huge amount of experience. It requires a lot of capital, and it requires a huge amount of talent, skill, technology that we can bring to bear on our assets. So the journey's been, for our company, has been phenomenal. Obviously, it's made up of a lot of legacy companies in our space. And as you know, this business is pretty cyclical. So we have weathered a lot of cycles. We're one of the few companies that haven't had to restructure. And we're very proud of that in recent times. So built upon lots of different companies and lots of different assets, but then as our customers have started to reach deeper and deeper to try and find the greater reserves. And from a reserve point of view, the deepwater fields tend to be the biggest fields, right? So when we're talking about volumes of hydrocarbons, while it is a very capital intensive concept and project to execute, the returns are very, very strong. And it takes our customers to put serious amounts of money in, billions of dollars to commit to these sort of fields, but the returns are really strong. And so the movement from shallow to deep is driven around the energy that is required to support the world's development.
And in these deep water, just for our listeners, is that where you normally see, because you mentioned all the different assets that you have under your portfolio, is that normally where you would see a ship? Would you see a semi-submersible there, right? Can you describe sort of what type of asset is sort of in what location?
Right. Well, as I said, we own the highest spec fleet in the world. And essentially what we have are 20 drill ships that will go to the deep water region. So to give you a context, we can put those rigs into 10,000 feet of water, which is what, 2 miles? Mm-hmm. We connect to the seabed 2 miles down, and then we drill.
You make it sound like it's a little amount. Imagine how deep that is when you're thinking about it.
When you think about it, it's
a
huge.
12-foot pool is deep enough,
right?
Me, you know?
Right, and we don't. Nobody's down at the seabed, right? This is all done remotely. The ships are big, mm-hmm. right? They're 800 feet long. That's like 2 football fields long. They're as wide as a football field, and they displace the same amount of water, the same amount of tonnage as an aircraft carrier. Wow. So just to put it in conceptual terms, they're huge. They're huge vessels. They need to be, because they've got to sit in that environment. And so we have 20 of those working in the deepwater provinces, which are typically, we call it the Golden Triangle, mm-hmm. is the main area for deepwater, which is U.S. Gulf. Yep. And then you draw a line right across to West Africa, mm-hmm. and then you can draw another line back over to South America and Brazil, right? So that triangle that exists there, that's the main deepwater province in the world. Of course, there are other provinces like mm-hmm. India and in Asia and places like that. But the most prevalent places is in that area. So those deepwater drill ships work in that area, mm-hmm. right? That's their main activity place. But they can work in shallower water as well. So the great thing about having a fleet like this is that you can move them around the world, right? And so we can address lots of different opportunities. The other part of our fleet is the semi-submersibles, completely different design vessel. It's built for the harsh environment, which means high seas, big currents, a lot of wind. So you find them in Norwegian North Sea, the continental shelf there. You'll find them in Eastern Canada. Mm-hmm. You'll find them in the Black Sea. Yeah. We have a rig working in the Black Sea right now, and people wouldn't even realize mm-hmm. how harsh those conditions are. And believe it or not, Australia. Oh. Australia is quite a harsh environment. We have both semi-submersibles, and we've worked drill ships in that area. So to give you context, that's kind of where the fleet kind of deploys. Mm-hmm. Very focused on really technically challenged areas, and also the harsh environment.
And so you spent your early years working on rigs long before stepping into executive leadership in an industry as complex and frankly as unforgiving as offshore drilling. How important is it for leaders like yourself to have had that firsthand experience, right? That boots on the deck experience, to truly understand the conditions and the challenges that these crews are facing on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's I think it connects me directly back to the core of the business, right? It, like any leader, will want to understand how their mm-hmm. team has to work, what they have to work in, and for me, best years of my life were working offshore when I started working in my early 20s, and I think being able to work in the jobs. On most of the jobs on board a rig, mm-hmm. I started scrubbing decks, right? And so working your way up means that you really learn and appreciate mm-hmm. what everybody else is doing in that point of view. And so there is a phrase that says, I won't ask anybody to do anything I wouldn't do myself, right? So I think that, that's important. Yeah. And when you're an operating company, which is what we are, we own and operate vessels, drill ships and the like. I think it's really important that you understand what you're asking your people to do, right? Absolutely. It's really important. Our customers want to have conversations about the challenges they're meeting. It's really important, I think, to understand that. And so I think it connects you with the company. I think it connects you with your customer. And I think you're able to relay that to your shareholders and investors, mm-hmm. and perhaps explain some of the complexities and the challenges that it takes to be an offshore driller.
And I would imagine that almost anyone who's really ever stepped onto a rig of sorts, whether it be a ship or a semi-submersible, for that first time, they sort of have that unforgettable kind of like first story, that like, oh my gosh, like I'm here type of moment, right? That moment that when it hits you, you sort of understand like for the next few weeks, because I know your people are there for weeks at a time, like this is my life. I'm no longer on, typical land. I'm now in the water. I'm on the ship. I'm on the semi-submersible. This is where my life currently is at this moment. So when you think back to your early days offshore, what sort of just were those first impressions, right? You said you started scrubbing decks. So like, what were those first impressions of like, oh my God, like I am on this rig of sorts. Like this is my life for the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, whatever it was.
Yeah, it's when I started, I was like 22, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was just looking for something different.
Yeah.
I was looking to try and understand what this was about. I remember going to the library in where I was studying to try and understand anything about oil and gas.
Sure.
I couldn't find anything. I found maybe a few pages in the library. We didn't have the internet back then, last year. A little bit old. But yeah,
I will say I lived my whole life with the internet. So pretty much, from when I can remember.
That doesn't make me feel very
No.
But so it was an adventure. And so I remember somebody told me I was going to get on a chopper and a helicopter, and I was going to be transferred to the rig by chopper. And that probably pretty much sold me.
Yeah.
But I do remember flying. I was working off the UK North Sea.
Okay.
That's where I kind of started. And I do remember the chopper ride. It was 4 hours, I think, with a bit of a break, and the chopper moved a lot in the sky. It was
because you mentioned North Sea and that harsh water,
harsh
area environment,
right? And the weather was high. I do remember when we eventually got to the rig, they tied a rope from the door of the chopper to the bulkhead on the rig. And we had to pull ourselves off. Yeah.
Wow.
We don't do that anymore.
Sure.
Let's be clear. But at that time, that was my first impression of what it was like. And of course, it was big and it was industrial and it was a work site and it was something very difficult to explain. A big tower in the middle of a rig, which is what we call the derrick, a heli deck and accommodation block and all of this deck space and equipment everywhere. And so what you feel is you're in a machine.
Yeah.
You feel like you are in this amazing industrial place, and it's a combination of how our people and our crews integrate with that and operate that equipment, and it is a remarkable experience. And so I got that bug in my early 20s, and I loved the fact that it was just really different. Yeah. It was really, really different. Not a lot of people knew about it. And if you can imagine, you're working with 100 other people on a rig, hundreds of miles away from shore. So you are, essentially self-sufficient. And so you definitely feel very different. You build, if you like, a new family.
Yeah.
And so we have, as we say, a work family, and we have our family at home, and we probably spend too much time with our work family and not enough with our home family, but it is that sort of environment.
And so I want to sort of play off of what you just said, right? You have your work family, you have your family at home. And there are obviously, as you mentioned in your previous answer, a lot of people who will never experience what it's like to step on a rig, myself included, right? I don't ever foresee that in my future. Granted, who knows where life will take you, but at least as of right now, I don't foresee that in my future. So it's something I know I'll never experience firsthand. But I do think it's important to really give listeners a sense of what that life is like what these people go through. So from your own years offshore, how would you kind of describe the life of these people, right? Being away from their families and really the commitment that they put into that, because that's what it is, right? It is a commitment of 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I'm going to be away from my family, whatever is going on with my family at that time. I'm going to be away from my family and be with my work family.
Yeah. I would love to take you to a rig. I would love to.
I might have to hold you.
Yeah, I would love to take you to a rig.
I don't know if I can convince my wife to let me go for 3 weeks, but maybe
we can do a shorter trip.
There you go.
We'll do a shorter trip. Yeah. Just to be able to. You're right. It's a great question, because how do you explain what that's like? And so I think first of all, when you think about our people and you think about the people that work offshore, they're very resilient, very adventurous, very focused, and they are very committed, very dedicated to what we do. We take great pride in what we do, and to perform like we do, it takes a huge degree of discipline and a huge degree of performance, to professionalism to do it. So the people that work on rigs are amazing people. They are so resourceful, and they have just so much ingenuity, and they're able to connect the technology with the practical application uniquely. I mean, drilling is a bit of art and a bit of science. It takes a huge amount of experience to be good at it, which is where I think the biggest strength of Transocean is. Our equipment is first class, and I think differentiated across our peer group, but it's really about the people and the type of people that we have, the culture that we generate as a result of that. So as a crew, I mean, look at myself, I had bunches of crews and people that I work with that I remain in contact with today. We all it's not unique. Actually, a lot of the management team have actually worked on rigs. And so we really connect with each other offshore. I think there's a degree of responsibility and accountability. The closest analogy I can give you is probably sports, team sports, like football, right? It's everybody has a role. And you have to perform your role in order for the entire operation to be successful, right? So you end up in a situation where you rely on people very quickly in your career. Either they're training you or you're relying on them to do a piece of their job. And so this reliance, your respect for what they do, and your willingness to listen. You work in a team from the get-go, and you learn how to play in a team well to get to the result you want, right? And so it's a unique experience. It's like being in a team your entire life, and it really is like being in a team. And you spend so long on that rig, and then you come home and you go back out again, and it's connections that last for lifetimes.
And it has to be, I would think, a well-oiled machine or a well-oiled team too. Because like you said, right, bringing up that football analogy, you take a look at a football field, you could have the best players at all 11 positions. But if one of the 11 positions doesn't do what they're supposed to do, a defender could come through, sack the quarterback. Well, there goes that whole play. It doesn't matter the talent you have. If everyone's not working cohesively, then that's where things can go awry. And I do want to touch on, because obviously, right, you're leading this business. You have shareholders in mind. You have making money at mind, right? Like, obviously, those are things of importance, but I would think of the utmost importance to you is safety and the safety of the people that are on these rigs, whether it be a ship or a semi-submersible. So when you're operating in deep water and these harsh environments, the stakes, don't have to tell you, incredibly high, right? Safety, it's not just a priority, right? It's something that must be embedded really in every decision that is made from when they wake up to when they go to sleep and then start over the next day. So from a leadership perspective for you, especially in a business built around risk management, because that's essentially what it is, what does that commitment to safety look like in practice on a day-to-day?
Again, this is where if I could get you on a rig and you could see it and
then
feel
I could really experience.
It is really easier for you to see. But imagine you land on a chopper, land on the rig, and the first thing you see is a coordinated approach to removing just the simple things of luggage and people, and how we coordinate and how we execute the simplest of tasks is a reflection of the sort of work and sort of how we approach all of the work on board the rig.
Every little detail. Every
little detail is absolutely mapped out. So it's about planning. It's about making sure everybody understands their role. It's making sure that you understand and everybody in the team understands what we're about to do, and then executing to that plan. And I would say one of the most important things to deal with the risk management, to deal with, understanding the level of performance you want to get to, is executing against that plan. It is the discipline that required to not drift. To ensure that we're going to follow those steps, because those steps are going to lead us to success, right? And so I would say safety for us is one of many, many core values that we have in order to run the operations as well as we want. And, we talk to our customers, you talk to our people, we take great pride in being the best operator. That's our differentiating piece. But the muscle we use to manage the safety of our people is the same muscle we use to manage the reliability of our equipment, and the same muscle we use to drive the performance we get from the combination, right? So the safest rig is always going to be the most highest performing rig, because it comes back to how did you plan the activity? How did you assess the job site? How did you execute the plan?
It's all connected.
It's all connected. And so for us, safety is right at our core. I mean, people like me, and I'm not unique. We've all worked on the rig, so there's a fundamental care that exists in our core culture. We want people who come to our rig, all people, not just our own Transocean crews. We want them to leave the rig in the same condition they came, right? And if not better, actually. And so it is built in to who we are, and how we do it is not words, it's actions, right? And it actually is the simplest of actions that you start building on as a foundation on, and it allows you to execute at a very high level. And it's very similar to the team analogy of football, right?
And you talked about executing to the plan, right? And not drifting away from that plan, not essentially taking the easy way out, right? You might think there may be an easier way to do this, this, and that, but if you make a decision that isn't the right decision, then we know things can go awry. And we know that if you stick to the plan, it's a plan that is tried and true. It's a plan that works. And to your point, as we talked about before, about having a leadership team that is experienced, right? You do know what it is like to be there. So you know the importance of that safety. You know how that safety is managed. You know how, and have experienced how you start. Like you said, you arrive at a rig in one condition and you want to leave at the same condition, if not better. I do want to shift the conversation now because it's prevalent in pretty much every industry, and I know is a large conversation or a large topic in a lot of our conversations, and that's AI and technological advancement as a whole, right? Yeah. We're seeing AI specifically reshape industries on both the front end and the back end, regardless of the industry that we're in. And for a company like Transocean, I imagine that influence extends from the rigs offshore to the teams obviously supporting them on the land as well. So with that in mind, just briefly, how has AI really been integrated into Transocean's operations, and where are you seeing its impact right now the most?
I think it's AI is just probably recently got a label, right? And it's interesting. We started working with technology and the data that we can generate from our equipment many years ago, right? And if you think about it, there's 10,000 probably pieces of equipment on a drill ship, right? And there's even thousands more components, right? So we get the data from our equipment, pipe back to shore. We then analyze that data, and we try to predict the condition of our equipment, right? And so several years ago, we were working under a calendar-based maintenance and then into a condition-based maintenance. Now we're trying to move into preventative. We're trying to model when we can expect a particular component or a particular piece of equipment
so
to
that
fail,
you're ready.
right? So that you can avoid the NPT or the non-productive time.
Sure.
When we talk to our customers, what they're most concerned about is the predictability of their project execution, right? They are spending billions of dollars to develop these fields. They need to make sure they're working with partners that can predictably perform, right? And so all of our work with respect to data and is all about how we can perform better. It's all about understanding the conditions and optimizing the performance of our equipment. But it doesn't stop there. We actually use digital data on how we manage safety, right? We're tracking conversations on pre-job talks, and we're able to work on we call them leading indicators. It's too late if you're working on why did a certain result happen, right? You really want to get up front, understand that you're having the right conversations, that the plan is solid.
Yeah, it's about being proactive.
And so what we're finding as a result of bringing this sort of approach to our operation is it's just driving, differentiated performance and service to our customers. So what I think we've been doing over time is we've been bringing a lot of data to bear and understanding that data. We're very data driven. But what AI is going to help us with is mining it, is processing it, is allowing us to get the right information to the right people at the right time in order to make the right decisions. And if you think about how drilling a well, we're making decisions all the time. Our people, they're amazing. They take so much data. They cannot see the bottom of the well when they're drilling it, right? They're using a lot of gauges and information that's coming at them to understand what's happening downhole. They create a picture. Imagine if we can help them process all of that data as quickly as we possibly can in order for them to make better decisions, right? And so this is our drive going forward. Huge opportunity, not just in the way we operate, but also the way we maintain our equipment, the way we manage our supply chain, right? We've got thousands of parts.
Sure.
You can imagine what managing an inventory of that fleet looks like. Being able to process a lot of data and execute the right actions to reduce your cost structure and remove waste from your business, it's a huge opportunity for us.
But I guess my question, you've been at Transocean for 30 years or so. With equipment and inventory that is so massive, right? Yeah. That takes time to build, that obviously needs to be operated on a daily basis. It seems like it could be an industry that is, I guess, slower to change, slower to move to not necessarily better things, but to change things and evolve. Yeah. Has a lot changed over the last 30 years, or do you see a lot of the similarities from when you first started to how rigs are working right now? Even with, the technological advancements that we have, whether it be AI, whether it be data analytics, I would still think that there are a lot of similarities to when you started scrubbing those decks to where you are now, obviously leading Transocean.
Yeah, you still got to scrub decks.
Yeah.
Right?
You're telling me you don't have a Roomba just sort of like going around the deck? Come on.
No, we don't have any of them. But what I will say is, for an industry that has to be very, very conscious of risk management and understand the consequences, and they're very, they can be very severe.
Very serious.
The industry is remarkably good at adopting technology. It takes a long time for us to get over the line to launch it, but when we do, we know what the outcome's going to be, right? Sure. And so the evolution of what rigs look like today compared to when I started is miles different, miles different. So everything was kind of manual when I was working. I mean, the guys I worked with, they were big, strong, and ugly. But nowadays, everything is automated, not automated, mechanized, right? So we have a lot of equipment that's remote operated, right? Sure. So we brought a lot of technology to bear there. I think we're moving into a more automated arena. We're driving a lot of technology and adopting technology to help us be more predictable, be more consistent by removing our operating the people operating equipment and move it into like a co-pilot, like into a move where we can push a button and the equipment will move in a certain sequence, right? You still need the people, because they're the ones making the decisions, right? They're
it won't be all automated. It won't be all agentic. Right? You need that human touch.
You absolutely do, because there's so much decisions to make. But imagine if you could free them up from the operating of the equipment and into a lot more about understanding what's going on in all avenues of what they're managing. And I think that is the next area of human performance that we're looking at, is how do we help have our people move in that direction. So the rigs are very, very different. They're highly mechanized, and there's a huge amount of technology on them now.
But still people scrubbing decks.
No. We want a clean deck. Housekeeping is super important.
Of course. No, of course. And when you're out there for 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time, if not more, I'd want to live in a clean place too. Yeah. What about what about communication wise? Because you obviously have all this data that you deal with on the rigs. You need to get it back to the teams on the land. Not trying to be funny, but obviously there is no cell service, right? Out there when you're hundreds of miles, off the coast of wherever you might be. How has technology evolved to sort of benefit that aspect of being able to get the data that you need back to land so that, you could then transfer it over to your customers or whatnot, right? How is that communication enhanced?
And that's a great question, because that's probably been the trigger for us to move into a much more data-driven environment. We needed the infrastructure that we didn't have 30 years ago to be able to transport that information. And we need to get it real time, and we need to get it as fast as we can. So there are some areas in the world where we've got fiber optic networks on the seabed, like the Norwegian North Sea. It is a huge amount of fiber optics, right? And so that allows them get to a point where we're operating equipment from shore. Right?
Wow.
And so That happens in the land business quite a bit right now, as you can imagine. Yeah. But if you're hundreds of miles offshore, getting that data back and being able to have it, the latency of it and the reliability of it, to be at the point where you can actually operate equipment in a warehouse in town, offshore, that's pretty impressive, right? For most areas in the world, especially in the deep water areas, obviously we don't have that sort of capability, so we rely on the satellite network, and we rely on the cell phone. Actually, the cell phone networks, and there's a lot more low satellites that are going up now that allow us to communicate a lot easier than we were. So that capability is only improving, and that infrastructure is building in place, which allows us to lever that and improve our business.
So I want to shift to energy security just for a moment, because it's become really a global priority as geopolitics intensify and as countries look for reliable long-term sources of supply. So from your perspective, what role does offshore drilling, Transocean obviously specifically, play in providing that kind of stability for the world's energy systems?
Right. Not even with security, and I'll come to energy security, but if you think about the global demand for energy, right, and you think about the role that hydrocarbons plays in that, our population in the world is only getting bigger, right? And the source of energy is actually depleting, right? And so the challenge that oil companies have today is to kind of replace that depletion, and that decline rates. There's a concern that the decline rates are not going to meet the global demand, right? So when you put that in context, and remember, there are billions of people in energy poverty. Yeah. I mean, we're in a beautiful podcast room here in the Western world, and there's a developing world out there that doesn't have the same opportunity. And as a result, they don't have the same lifespan. Yep. So, we believe in the role we play. We take great pride in it because it's all about bringing this energy to help that situation, right? And then you think about the energy security issues that have developed over the last 4 or 5 years, and you think about the conflicts that are happening. It's in the every time you open the newspaper, or actually there's no newspapers anymore.
Anytime you open your phone,
you're seeing what's going on, right? And a lot of countries, especially in Europe, are pivoting their policies to ensure that they have energy security for their people. And so that is also driving more demand for oil and gas and energy sources as a whole. So we see the picture as growth, and we're going to need everything. Yep. Every piece of energy that we can bring to the table is probably less about transition and more about addition, right? And so from our perspective, the energy security situation is driving more demand. The need for more energy is driving demand, and also the decline rates of the existing fields. And why offshore and why deep water and why those areas? It comes back to one of my earlier points, which is these are the bigger resources, right? So what you want to do is drill less wells in bigger fields and be able to extract bigger volumes. And the biggest volumes exist offshore deep water. The returns on those investments are very, very strong. And so this is why the oil companies, and why you're probably reading that there's an uptick in expectation in how the demand is going to go over the next few years.
So, Keelan, let's look ahead now as we start to wrap things up. First, just when you look at the next 5 years to the next decade of the offshore drilling industry as a whole, right? Not just Transocean, but the industry as a whole. Right. What trends do you think will really shape it? What should people keep their eye out that will really sort of move the needle in offshore drilling?
In terms of activity?
In terms of activity, in terms of, we talked obviously technological and management too, but, what will really sort of dictate and shape the next, 5 to 10 years?
I think what you're going to see is a lot more projects getting through their customers are going to start approving a lot more of their projects. I think one of the bigger things that's going to happen that hasn't happened in several years, some of our customer CEOs are now starting to talk about exploration. And exploration is now becoming something that they realize and are discussing with their teams, their boards, and their shareholders. we have decline. We have decline rates. So we need to replace those reserves. And so committing CapEx, committing capital to dedicated exploration programs is going to be necessary. So I think you're going to see probably a bigger exploration program over the next 5 years as they look to find the next set of resources that are going to supply that. So that I would keep an eye out on exploration activity. In terms of rig activity, we're probably at the lowest point we've been in the last few years, and I think you're going to find that the offshore floating rig activity as an industry is going to get more and more utilized, right? And so we're expecting to be, as an industry, well into 90% utilized in 27.
Sure.
So watch for the rig count getting utilized more. There's some idle assets on the sideline. When we reach that point, perhaps the economics will support bringing some of that idle capacity back out. And I think there's enough assets in the world to handle the projects that we're going to need.
Sure.
But we need to use probably most of them.
Sure.
Right. And so...
And that comes with bringing some of those idle projects back.
But bringing some of that idle capacity back when the market gets strong enough. It's interesting. Back in 2014, there were 328 floaters in the world, right, working. And now we're working about 122.
Wow.
So
those other 200 and however many are
we've essentially recycled half of the world's fleet.
Wow.
So there probably is only 140 rigs, maybe even less, that can go to work.
And that's ships and semi-submersibles?
Ships and semis. And so when you think about, that supply has dropped by 50%, and the demand is still not quite there to bring that back. So it doesn't take much for the demand to move to fully utilize the existing fleet that's on the water today.
Sure.
And I think that bodes very, very well for Transocean and the industry as the opportunities are there, right? And we need to get after those.
So 100th anniversary, which we started talking about at the beginning of our conversation, incredible milestone. And congratulations to the whole Transocean team on reaching that century mark. So if you imagine we're sitting here 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where you're celebrating 110, you're celebrating 120, whatever it may be, what are we discussing, right? What does the next chapter for Transocean look like?
I hope we're discussing, how are you going to meet the future demand? You don't have enough rigs, right?
We might be discussing my trip to a rig.
And we might be reflecting on that visit, right? I think what we'll be talking about is we'll always be talking about our people, right? The people we have in our company and in the industry are remarkable. And I think that talent is entirely unique and will be core to the success of our company going forward. I think we'll be talking about technology as we always talk about technology, and we'll be trying to develop technology that builds even better performance from the fleet, and frankly, it'll enable more work because as we become more reliable as an industry to supply energy, there'll be more opportunities. So I think we'll be talking about the opportunity of automation. We'll be talking about what AI continues to bring to bear. We'll be talking about, somebody will be talking about, how long your assets going to last and do we need to start replacing them? We'll be talking a lot about how maybe we're at a point where we've got a fully automated rig on the table that we're looking at to operate in areas that are even more extreme than we operate today. Well, we'll always be talking about opportunity. We'll always be talking about addressing the challenges that our industry has to meet, and we'll always be talking about the amazing people that we have in our industry that make it happen.
Well, Keelan, first podcast in the books.
First podcast in the books.
Thank you so much for the conversation, and thank you so much for joining me inside the Ice House.
Thank you, Lance. It's been a real pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about Transocean today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.